Thanks for selling your car to Carvana. Here's your check.
Whoa, when did I get here?
What do you mean?
I swear it was just moments ago that I accepted a great offer from Carvana online. I must have time traveled to the future.
It was just moments ago. We do same-day pickup. Here's your check for that great offer.
It is the future.
It's the present and just the convenience of Carvana. Sorry to blow your mind.
It's all good. Happens all the time.
Sell your car the convenient way to
Carvana.
Pickup times may vary and fees may apply.
This episode is brought to you by JCPenney. Yes, JCPenney. And if you've been there recently, you know it's the place to go for jaw-dropping looks at brag-worthy prices. They've got something special for every style and budget, not to mention rewards and deals that make finding those hidden gems even sweeter. If you already shop JCPenney, you're already in on the secret. But if not, it's time to ask. Wait, am I sleeping on JCPenney? Shop JCPenney.com. Yes, JCPenney.
Hey, my name's Otis Gray, and you're listening to Sleepy. A podcast where I read old books to help you get to sleep. And this is a midweek short story for you. So, I really have been trying to feature brilliant women writers from back during this time, the late 1800s, early 1900s, an era, dominated by men. And I've really been trying to focus on putting forward these incredible women writers of the time. And tonight is another story from another incredible writer from that time named Mary E. Wilkins. It's a short story that I loved reading, and I think you're really going to like too. And before we get to the bedtime reading, I just want to profoundly thank all of our patrons on patreon.com. You are absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And for anyone who doesn't know, Patreon is just a great site where you can go and pledge a couple bucks for an ad-free version of Sleepy and be a part of making this show directly, like over 1,000 people. And in exchange for donating, $1, $2 a month, you get cool perks. And no matter how much you donate, it really means a lot, even $1. And even $1, I will read your name in the opening credits of the next show after you do. So, if you would like to be a part of making this show, like so many listeners are currently, then please, I would love to have you go to patreon.com/sleepyradio. Thank you. And as always, the music you're hearing is by my good friend James Lepkowski, and the cover art for Sleepy is by Gracie Kanan. Well, tonight, as I said, I've got a writer here named Mary E. Wilkins who we've read on the show before. She's fantastic. And this is from a collection of short stories called A New England Nun and Other Stories. Don't worry, I will be reading the story, A New England Nun, soon. But tonight, I have a story which is about a really incredible friendship between two women. And this is a really great story. I enjoyed reading it. So I really hope that you enjoy falling asleep to it. This was also fun because I read this on a live stream on Patreon, which is not something I usually do, but is something I'm trying to do more of, and the patrons who tune in seem to really love just watching me read these stories and, make little mistakes and then go back and fix them and kind of get a look into the process of making the Sleepy podcast. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can always just let me know in the comments on Spotify. I would love to do more stuff like that. Or come hang out on Patreon. You'll definitely be seeing me read if you do. Anyways, I really love this story, so without further ado, A Gala Dress by Mary E. Wilkins. And now is the time for you to fluff up your pillow just how you like it. Feel yourself melt into your bed. Get real comfortable. Close your eyes and let me read to you. A Gala Dress. I don't care anything about going to that 4th of July picnic, Elizabeth. I wouldn't say anything more about it if I was you, Emily. I'd get ready and go. I don't really feel able to go, Elizabeth. I'd like to know why you aren't able. It seems to me as if the firecrackers and the tooting on these horns would drive me crazy, and Matilda Jennings says they're going to have a cannon down there and fire it off every half hour. I don't feel as if I could stand it. You know my nerves ain't very strong, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Babcock uplifted her long, delicate nose with its transparent nostrils and sniffed. Apparently, her sister's pervasiveness had an unacceptable odor to her. I wouldn't talk so if I was you, Emily. Of course you're going. It's your turn to, and you know it. I went to meeting last Sabbath. You just put on that dress and go. Emily eyed her sister. She tried not to look pleased. I know you went to meeting last, said she, hesitatingly, but a 4th of July picnic is a little more of a rarity. She fairly jumped. Her sister confronted her with such sudden vigor. Rarity? Well, I hope a 4th of July picnic ain't quite such a treat to me that I'd rather go to it than a meeting. I should think you'd be ashamed of yourself speaking so, Emily Babcock. Emily, a moment before delicately alert and nervous like sister, shrank limply into her limp black muslin. I didn't think how it sounded, Elizabeth. Well, I should say you'd better think. It don't sound very becoming for a woman of your age, and professing what you do. Now you'd better go and get that dress, and rip the velvet off, and sew the lace on. There won't be any too much time. They'll start early in the morning. I'll stir up a cake for you to carry when I get to you. Don't you suppose I could get along without a cake? Emily ventured, tremulously. Well, I shouldn't think you'd want to go, and be beholden to other folks for your eating. I shouldn't. I shouldn't want anything to eat. I guess if you go, you're going like other folks. I ain't gonna have Matilda Jennings peeking and prying and telling things if I know it. You better get out that dress. Well, said Emily, with a long sigh of remorseful satisfaction. She arose, showing a height that would have approached the majestic had it not been so wavering. The sisters were about the same height, but Elizabeth usually impressed people as being the taller. She carried herself with so much decision that she seemed to carry every inch of her stature, firm and taut, old woman although she was. Let's see that dress a minute, she said, when Emily returned. She wiped her spectacles, set them firmly, and began examining the hem of the dress, holding it close to her eyes. You're getting of it all tagged out, she declared. Presently, I thought you was. I thought I saw some ravelings hanging the other day when I had it on. It's just because you don't stand up straight. It any longer for you than it is for me. If you didn't get all bent over so, there ain't any need of it. Emily oscillated warily over her sister and the dress. I ain't very strong in my back, and you know I've got a weakness in my stomach that hinders me from standing up straight as you do, she rejoined, rallying herself for a feeble defense. You can stand up just as well as I can, if you're a mind to. I'll rip that velvet off now if you let me have the dress, Elizabeth." Elizabeth passed over the dress, handling it gingerly. "Mind you don't cut it ripping it off," said she. Emily sat down, and the dress lay in shiny black billows over her lap. The dress was black silk, and had its day very soft and heavy. Even now there was considerable wear left in it. The waist and overskirt were trimmed with black velvet ribbon. Emily ripped off the velvet. Then she sewed on some old-fashioned, straight-edged black lace, full of little embroidered sprigs. The sisters sat in their parlor, at the right of the front door. The room was very warm, for there were 2 west windows and a hot afternoon sun was beating upon them. Out in front of the house was a piazza, with a cool, uneven brick floor, and a thick lilac growth across the western end. The sisters might have sat there and been comfortable, but they would not. Set right out in the face and eyes of all the neighbors, they would have exclaimed with dismay had the idea been suggested. There was about these old women and all their belongings a certain gentle and deprecatory reticence. One felt it immediately upon entering their house, or indeed upon coming in sight of it. There were never any heads at the windows. The blinds were usually closed. Once in a while a passerby might see an old woman, well shielded by shawl and scooping sunbonnet, start up like a timid spirit in the yard, and softly disappear through a crack in the front door. Out in the front yard, Emily had a little bed of flowers, of balsams and nasturtiums and portulacas. She tended them with furtive glances toward the road. Elizabeth came out in the early morning to sweep the brick floor of the piazza, and the front door was left ajar for a hurried flitting should anyone appear. This excessive shyness and secrecy had almost the aspect of guilt, but no more guileless and upright persons could have imagined than these 2 old women. They had over their parlor windows full, softly falling, old muslin curtains, and they looped them back to leave bare the smallest possible space of glass. The parlor chairs retreated close to the walls. The polish of the parlor table lit up a dim corner. There were very few ornaments in sight. The walls were full of closets and little cupboards, and in them all superfluities were tucked away to protect them from the dust and prying eyes. Never a door in the house stood open. Every bureau drawer was squarely shut. A whole family of skeletons might have been well hidden in these guarded recesses, but skeletons there were none, except perhaps a little innocent bone or 2 of old womanly pride and sensitiveness. The Babcock sisters guarded nothing more jealously than the privacy of their meals. The neighbors considered that there was a decided reason for this. The Babcock girls have so little to eat that they're ashamed to let folks see it, people said. It was certain that the old women regarded intrusion at their meals as an insult, but it was doubtful if they would not have done so had their table been set out with all the luxuries of the season instead of the scanty bread and butter and no sauce. No sauce for tea was regarded as very poor living by the village women. Tonight the Babcocks had tea very soon after the lace was sewed in the dress. They always had tea early. They were in the midst of it when the front door opened and a voice was heard calling out in the hall. The sisters cast a dismayed and indignant look at each other. They both arose, but the door flew open, and their little square tea table, with its green and white china pot of weak tea, its plate of bread and little glass dish of butter, its 2 china cups, and thin silver teaspoons, was displayed to view. "My," cried the visitor, with a little backward shuffle I do hope you'll excuse me. I didn't know you was eating supper. I wouldn't have come in the world if I'd known. I'll go right out. It wasn't anything particular, anyhow. All the time her sharp and comprehensive gaze was on the tea table. She counted the slices of bread. She measured the butter as she talked. The sisters stepped forward with dignity. "Come into the other room," said Elizabeth, and the visitor, still protesting, with her backward eyes upon the tea table, gave way before her. But her eyes lighted upon something in the parlor more eagerly than they had upon that frugal and exclusive table. The sisters glanced at each other in dismay. The black silk dress lay over the chair. The caller, who was their neighbor Matilda Jennings, edged toward it as she talked. "I thought I'd just run over and see you wanting to go to the picnic tomorrow," she was saying. Then she clutched the dress and diverged. "Oh, you've been fixing your dress," she said to Emily, with innocent insinuation. Insinuation did not sit well upon Matilda Jennings. None of her bodily lines were adapted to it, and the pretense was quite evident. She was short and stout, with a hard, sallow rotundity of cheek. Her small black eyes were bright pointed under fleshy brows. "Yes, I have," replied Emily, with a scared glance at Elizabeth. "Yes," said Elizabeth, stepping firmly into the subject and confronting Matilda with prim and resolute blue eyes. "She has been fixing it. The lace was ripped off, and she had to mend it." "It's pretty lace, ain't it? I had some of the same on a mantilla once when I was a girl. This makes me think of it. The sprigs in mine was set a little closer. Let me see, Elizabeth. Your black silk dress is trimmed with velvet, ain't it?" Elizabeth surveyed her calmly. "Yes, I've always worn black velvet on it," said she. Emily sighed faintly. She had feared that Elizabeth could not answer desirably and be truthful. "Let me see," continued Matilda. "How was that velvet put on your waist?" "It was put on peaked." "In one peak or two?" "One." "Now I wonder if it would be too much trouble for you just to let me see it a minute. I've been thinking of fixing over my old alpaca a little, and I've got a piece of black velvet ribbon I've steamed over, and it looks pretty good. I thought maybe I could put it on, like yours." Matilda Jennings, in her chocolate calico, stood as relentlessly as any executioner before the Babcock sisters. They, slim and delicate and pale in their flabby black muslins, leaned toward each other. Then Elizabeth straightened herself. "Sometime, when it's convenient, I'd just as soon show it as not," said she. "Well, I'd be much obliged to you if you would," returned Matilda. Her manner was a trifle overwrought, but there was a sharper gleam in her eyes. Pretty soon she went home and ate her solitary and substantial supper of bread and butter, cold potatoes, and pork and beans. Matilda Jennings was as poor as the Babcocks. She had never, like them, known better days. She had never possessed any fine old muslins nor black silks in her life, but she had always eaten more. The Babcocks had always delicately and unobtrusively felt themselves above her. There had been in their lives a faint savor of gentility and aristocracy. Their father had been college-educated and a doctor. Matilda's antecedents had been humble, even in this humble community. She had come of wood sawyers and garden laborers. In their youth, when they had gone to school and played together, they had always realized their height above Matilda, and even old age and poverty and a certain friendliness could not do away with it. The Babcocks owned their house and a tiny sum in the bank, upon the interest of which they lived. Nobody knew how much it was. Nobody would ever know while they lived. They might have had more if they would not have sold or mortgaged their house, but they would have died first. They starved daintily and patiently on their little income. They mended their old muslins and Tibets and wore one dress between them for the best, taking turns in going out. It seemed inconsistent, but the sisters were very fond of society, and their reserve did not interfere with the pleasure in the simple village outings. They were more at ease abroad than at home, perhaps because there were not present so many doors which could be opened into their secrecy. But they had an arbitrary conviction that their claims to respect and consideration would be forever forfeited should they appear on state occasions in anything but black silk. To their notions of etiquette, black silk was as sacred a necessity as feathers at the English court. They could not go abroad and feel any self-respect in those flimsy muslins and rusty woolens, which are very flimsy and rusty. The old persons in the village could hardly remember when the Babcocks had a new dress. The dainty care with which they had made those tender old fabrics endure so long was powerful. They held up their skirts primly when they walked. They kept their pointed elbows clear of chairs and tables. The black silk in particular was taken off the minute its wearer entered her own house. It was shaken softly, folded, and laid away in a linen sheet. Emily was dressed in it on the 4th of July morning when Matilda Jennings called for her. Matilda came in her voluminous old alpaca, with her tin lunch pail on her arm. She looked at Emily in the black silk, and her countenance changed. "My, you ain't going to wear that black silk trailing around in the woods, are you?" said she. "I guess she won't trail around much," spoke up Elizabeth. "She's got to go looking decent." Matilda's poor old alpaca had many a threadbare streak and mended slip in its rusty folds. The elbows were patched. It was hardly respectable. But she gave the skirt a defiant switch and jerked the patched elbows. "Well, I always believed in going dressed suitable for the occasion," said she, sturdily, and as if that was her special picnic costume out of a large wardrobe. However, her bravado was not deeply seated. All day long, she maneuvered to keep her patches and darns out of sight. She arranged the skirt nervously every time she changed her position. She held her elbows close to her sides, and she made many little flings at Emily's black silk. The festivities were nearly over. The dinner had been eaten. Matilda had devoured the relish, her brown bread and cheese and cold pork, and Emily had nibbled daintily at her sweet cake and glanced with inward loathing at her neighbor's grosser fare. The speeches by the local celebrities were delivered. The cannon had been fired every half hour. The sun was getting low in the west, and a golden mist was rising among the fenny undergrowth in the grove. "It's getting damp. I can see it rising," said Emily, who was rheumatic. "I guess we better walk around a little and then go home." "Well," replied Matilda, "I'd just as soon. You better hold up your dress." The two old women adjusted themselves stiffly upon their feet and began ranging the grove, stepping warily over the slippery pine needles. The woods were full of merry calls. The green distances fluttered with light draperies. Every little while came the sharp bang of a firecracker, the crash of a cannon, or the melancholy hoot of a fish horn. Now and then, blue gunpowder smoke curled up with the golden stream from the dewy ground. Emily was nearsighted. She moved on with innocently peering eyes, her long neck craned forward. Matilda had been taking the lead, but she suddenly stepped aside. Emily walked on unsuspectingly, holding up her precious black silk. There was a quick puff of smoke, a leap of flame, a volley of vicious little reports, and poor Emily Babcock danced as a martyr at her fiery trial might have done. Her gentle dignity completely deserted her. "Oh, oh, oh," she shrieked. Matilda Jennings pushed forward. By that time, Emily was standing, pale and quivering, on a little heap of ashes. "You stepped into a nest of firecrackers," said Matilda. "The boy just run. I saw him. What made you stand there in him? Why didn't you get out?" "I couldn't," gasped Emily. She could hardly speak. "Well, I guess it ain't done much harm. Them boys ought to be prosecuted. You don't feel as if you were burned anywhere, do you, Emily?" "No, I guess not. Seems to me your dress. Just look at me, at your dress, Emily. My, ain't that a wicked shame? Just look at all them holes, right down to the flouncing, where it'll show." It was true. The flounce that garnished the bottom of the black silk was scorched in a number of places. Emily looked at it and felt faint. "I must go right home," she moaned. "Oh dear." "Maybe you can darn it, if you're real particular about it," said Matilda, with an uneasy air. Emily said nothing. She went home. Her dress switched the dust off the wayside weeds, but she paid no attention to it. She walked so fast that Matilda could hardly keep up with her. When she reached her own gate, she swung it swiftly, too, before Matilda's face, and then fled into the house. Matilda came to the parlor door with a letter in her hand. She cried out. When she saw her sister's face, "What is the matter, Emily? For pity's sake." "You can't never go out again, Elizabeth. You can't. You can't." "Why can't I go out? I'd like to know." "What do you mean, Emily Babcock?" "You can't. You never can again. I stepped into some firecrackers and I burned some great holes around it, the flouncing. You can't never wear it without folks knowing. Matilda Jennings will tell." "Oh, Elizabeth, what will you do?" "I hope I ain't so set on going out at any time of life as all that comes to. Let's see it. I can't mend that." "No, you can't. Matilda would see it if you did. Oh dear, oh dear." Emily dropped into a corner and put her slim hands over her face. "Do stop acting so," said her sister. "I've just had a letter, and Aunt Elizabeth is dead." After a little, Emily looked up. "When did she die?" she asked, in a despairing voice. "Last week." "Did they ask us to the funeral?" "Of course they did. It was last Friday at 2:00 in the afternoon. They knew the letter couldn't get to us till after the funeral, but of course they'd asked us." "What did they say the matter was?" "Old age, I guess, as much as anything. Aunt Elizabeth was a good deal over 80. Emily sat reflectively. She seemed to be listening while her sister related more at length the contents of the letter. Suddenly, she interrupted. "Elizabeth." "Well?" "I was thinking, Elizabeth, you know those crepe veils we wore when Mother died?" "Well, what of them?" I don't see why you couldn't make a flounce of those veils and put on this dress when you wore it. Then she wouldn't know." "I'd like to know what I'd wear a crepe flounce for." "Why, mourning for Aunt Elizabeth." "Emily Babcock, what sense would there be in my wearing mourning when you didn't? You was named for her, and it's a very different thing. You can just tell folks that was named for your aunt that just died, and you felt as if you ought to wear a little crepe on your best dress. It'll be an awful job to put on a different flounce every time we wear it. I'll do it. I'm perfectly willing to do it. Oh, Elizabeth, I shall die if you ever go out again and wear that dress. For pity's sakes, don't, Emily. I'll get at those veils after supper and look at 'em. The next Sunday, Elizabeth wore the black silk garnished with a crepe flounce to church. Matilda Jennings walked home with her and eyed the new trimming sharply. Got a new flounce, ain't you? Said she, finally. I had word last week that my Aunt Elizabeth Taylor was dead, and I thought it wasn't anything more fitting than I should put on a little crepe, replied Elizabeth with dignity. Has Emily put on mourning too? Emily ain't any call to. She wasn't named after her, as I was, and she never saw her but once, when she was just a little girl. It ain't more'n 10 years since I saw her. She lived out west. I didn't feel as if Emily had any call to wear crepe. Matilda said no more, but there was an unquelled suspicion in her eye as they parted on the Babcock gate. The next week, a trunk full of Aunt Elizabeth Taylor's clothes arrived from the west. Her daughter had sent them. There was in the trunk a goodly store of old woman's finery, 2 black silks among the other gowns. Aunt Elizabeth had been a dressy old lady, although she died in her 80s. It was such a great surprise to the sisters. They had never dreamed of such a thing. They palpitated with awe and delight as they took out the treasures. Emily clutched Elizabeth, the thin hand closing around the thin arm. Elizabeth, what is it? We won't say anything about this to anybody. We'll just go together to meeting next Sabbath and wear those black silks and let Matilda Jennings see. Elizabeth looked at Emily. A gleam came into her dim blue eyes. She tightened her thin lips. Well, we will, said she. The following Sunday, the sisters wore the black silks to church. During the week, they appeared together at a sewing meeting, then at church again. The wonder and curiosity were certainly not confined to Matilda Jennings. The eccentricity which the Babcock sisters displayed in not going into society together had long been a favorite topic in the town. There had been a great deal of speculation over it. Now that they had appeared together 3 consecutive times, there was much talk. On Monday following, the second Sunday, Matilda Jennings went down to the Babcock house. Her cape bonnet was on one side, but it was firmly tied. She opened the door softly when her old muscles were straining forward to jerk the latch. She sat gently down in the proffered chair and displayed quite openly a worn place over the knees in her calico gown. We had a pleasant Sabbath yesterday, didn't we? Said she. Real pleasant, assented the sisters. I thought we had a good discourse. The Babcocks assented again. I heard a good many say they thought it was a good discourse, repeated Matilda, like an emphatic chorus. Then she suddenly leaned forward, and her face, in the depths of her houri bonnet, twisted into a benevolent smile. I was real glad to see you out together, she whispered, with meaning emphasis. The sisters smiled stiffly. Matilda paused for a moment. She drew herself back, as if to gather strength for a thrust. She stopped smiling. I was glad to see you out together, for I thought it was too bad, the way folks was talking, she said. Elizabeth looked at her. How were they talking? Well, I don't know if there's any harm in my telling you. I've been thinking maybe I ought to for some time. It's been round considerable lately that you and Emily didn't get along well, and that was the reason you didn't go out more together. I told him I had no idea what it was, though. Of course, I couldn't really tell. I was real glad to see you out together, because there's never any knowing how folks do get along, and I was real glad to see you'd settle if there had been any trouble. There ain't been any trouble. Well, I'm glad if there ain't been any, and if there has, I'm glad to see it settled, and I know other folks will be too. Elizabeth stood up. If you want to know the reason why we haven't been out together, I'll tell you, said she. You've been trying to find out things every way you could. Now, I'll tell you. You drove me to it. We had just one decent dress between us, and Emily and me took turns wearing it. And Emily used to wear lace on it, and I used to rip the lace off and sew on black velvet when I wore it, so folks shouldn't know it was the same dress. Emily and me never had a word in our lives, and it's a wicked lie for folks to say we have. Emily was softly weeping in her handkerchief. There was not a tear in Elizabeth's eyes. There were bright spots on her cheeks, and her slim height overhung Matilda Jennings imposingly. My Aunt Elizabeth, that I was named for, died 2 or 3 weeks ago, she continued, and they sent us a trunk full of her clothes, and there was 2 decent dresses among them, and that's the reason why Emily and me have been out together since. Now, Matilda Jennings, you found out the whole story, and I hope you're satisfied. Now that the detective instinct and the craving inquisitiveness which were so strong in this old woman were satisfied, she should have been more jubilant than she was. She had suspected what nobody else in town had suspected. She had verified her suspicion and discovered what the secrecy and pride of the sisters had concealed from the whole village. Still, she looked uneasy and subdued. I shan't tell anybody, said she. You can tell nobody you're a mind to. I shan't tell nobody. Matilda Jennings rose. She had passed the parlor door when she faced about. I suppose I kind of begrudged you that black silk, said she, or I shouldn't have cared so much about fine now. I never had a black silk myself, nor any of my folks that I ever heard of. I ain't got nothing decent to wear anyway. There was a moment's silence. We shan't lay up anything, said Elizabeth then, and Emily sobbed responsively. Matilda passed on and opened the outer door. Elizabeth whispered to her sister, and Emily nodded eagerly. You'd tell her, said she. Matilda, called Elizabeth. Matilda looked back. I was just going to say that, if you wouldn't resent it. It got burned some, but we mended it nice, that you're perfectly welcome to that black silk. Emily and me don't really need it, and we'd be glad to have you have it. There were tears in Matilda Jennings' black eyes, but she held them unwinkingly. Thank you, she said, in a gruff voice, and stepped along over the piazza, down the steps. She reached Emily's flower garden. The peppery sweetness of the nasturtiums came up in her face. It was quite early in the day, and the portulacas were still out in a splendid field of crimson and yellow. Matilda turned about. Her broad foot just cleared a yellow portulaca, which had straggled into the path, but she did not notice it. The homely old figure pushed past the flowers into the house again. She stood before Elizabeth and Emily. Look here, said she, with a fine light struggling out of her coarse old face. I want to tell you. I see them firecrackers a-sizzling before Emily stepped in 'em. Thank you for listening to Sleepy. Good night.